Mud 39. We'll call the meeting to order. Receive any comments from the public? There being none, we'll move forward. Consider an act on the request for adjustments to or relief from specific charges imposed by the district. Nothing. Moving on. Items 4 through 7 are the consent agenda. If we need to take anything out of the consent agenda, that would be the time to do it now. Otherwise, we need to entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. And a second.
Second.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Regular agenda item number 8, receive and act upon staff information regarding the upcoming MCAD MCAD Board of Directors elections for the term of office January 1 through December of 2024.
So there's no action to be taken today. This was put on each of the MUD's agendas with the expectation that one of the MUDs would kind of pick up the ball and roll with it. Essentially, there's a process that needs to be followed in order to nominate a individual to be on the MCAD board. Metro MUD did that on Monday. So they agreed to participate, first option or first piece of the process, participate in the election with the expectation that they would then nominate Arthur Greenhoff, who's on the board now and would theoretically be the nominee for the MUDs. I think Arthur will be coming back to the MUDs probably next month and asking for support, but there's no action for you to be taken today.
Okay. So just a point of clarification. So the MUDs collectively get to recommend or to nominate or to suggest?
Only one needs to.
Okay.
And then participate, and then really only one nomination is needed. What the important part will be is the voting process later this year in August, I believe.
Okay.
One question, what is MCAD?
Montgomery County Appraisal District.
Thank you.
So I guess for clarification, the MCAD has a board of directors, a board of trustees, or they call directors? Board of directors, and various components from the community, will put somebody up for that position.
Sure.
And or gets voted on. And
I didn't mention it. Good point. So he currently sits in an ISD school district position, but he's running or trying to get the special districts position, which would make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And he currently serves on in that role and has for a while from various appointments and or various support, for lack of a better word. So I personally know Arthur, and I guess I would suggest that when it comes time to that, we support him as well in that role. Okay. All right. So thank you, Eric. Item number 9, receive the San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division report.
Good afternoon.
Ed?
Starting on page 17 is our monthly operating report. Starting on page 1, would like to call attention to page 25, where there are some awards that SJA received recently at Texas Water. And then starting on page 27 is the groundwater reduction plan operations report for your information. And then Haley can talk to you about our proposed budget, which starts on page 37.
For y'all today.
Good. How are you?
Good. I do have a slideshow presentation if y'all want to kind of slide away so that you don't get blinded or we can go through it.
I'll put our ball heads down.
You can still see me at the end of the day. Blinded there. Yeah, there we go. So as Ed mentioned, this is the FY24 budget presentation for the Woodlands division of SJA. My name is Haley Longhorn and I'm the Woodlands accountant at SJA. This presentation is also in your packet. Once I get there, I'll tell you what page. So the presentation or the whole information for this presentation is on page 35 in your packet. In your packet, there's an executive summary that Chris put together that goes over the highlights of the things that we're going to talk about today. And then after that, starting on page 38, is our actual draft budgets in its entirety for the operating budget and capacity budget and R&R and future facilities. So with that being said, the rest of what we're gonna talk about is the presentation here.
Page 46.
Page 46. So in your packet, this presentation that is on the slide is also in here for your reference. But page 47 is the first slide where we're gonna get started. So just as a reminder or not a reminder, but as for your information today, this presentation is just for your information, and we will be asking for a vote on our rates and to approve our budget in July from the individual MUDs, and the trustees will vote in August, and our board votes in August as well. So this is for your information tonight. We do have another meeting tomorrow night from 5:30 to 7:30 that will go over this budget and also our project plan in more detail. If anyone is interested in joining us for that, please let Summer Boston know. She's taking RSVPs for that meeting. So when we're putting together our budget, there are several things that we consider, but I've got a few up here that we talk about as we're developing our budget and the considerations that we use. The first thing we look at is our sales and our demands that we anticipate. How much water do we think we can produce, and how much wastewater do we think we can treat? And in turn, how much of that do we think we can meter and sell back to the customers? So our wastewater is going to remain constant in our demands from FY23 to FY24. We are changing our water demands slightly but we are changing the water loss percent from 9% to 5.5%, which does increase our sales. So if we reduce how much water we're losing, we can sell more water essentially. So that is the change in our demands. There's that increase, decrease in water loss, increase in sales. So the next thing we look at is our cost increases that we're seeing historically. So from FY23 to FY24, we're seeing still an increase in our chemicals, sludge hauling, electricity, payroll, and the new one for this year is public communications. As y'all know, we have these projects coming up in the Woodlands, and we have been asked to help facilitate a consultant help with the Woodlands and that public education campaign. So you'll see that in our budget as well. The next thing that we look at is our project plan and how much of our project plan is going to be funded by funded through our R&R fund, and what type of transfer we need from our operating fund to the R&R to make sure that that project plan can be completed. This year we are keeping it the same as FY23 with a $6 million transfer from operating to R&R for that project. The last thing that we look, one of the last things on here that we look at is our blend ratio. So we are keeping it the same from FY23 to FY24. Our blend ratio will stay at 50-50, so 50% groundwater and 50% surface water. Okay. So we have been asked to keep a few things in the budget over the past few years. So we wanted to give y'all an update on those items and where they stand in our FY24 proposed budget. The first one is the USGS stream monitoring gauges. There are 7 in the Woodlands, and we have found other funding partners for these gauges. So they are, the cost to maintain them is coming out of the Woodlands budget, but the gauges are still staying in the Woodlands, so you will still have that data. You will see 6350 still in the budget. That is because our contract runs through October 1st. So there is 1 month of that contract still in our budget. The second thing that we're looking at is the lobbyist. We were asked to look at the contract for this lobbyist, and we did decide to remove it from the FY24 budget at y'all's direction. So there is 40,000 in the FY24 budget, and it is because the contract goes through December of 23. So that is 4 months at 10,000 a month. So this slide is a summary slide from the draft budget that's in y'all's packet. This is just some of the summary categories here for y'all to see. The variances from FY23 to 24 in dollars and in percents. So if y'all have any questions on this, I'll move on. And like I said, we're gonna cover some more of this detail in the presentation, but the detail is also in your packet. So that's all, thanks.
You said we're also gonna see this one more time, right? Before we vote on it?
If you come Thursday, you will see it one more time. If you have any questions, we can answer it, but we're not going to present it. The individual ones. So this slide is just to kind of talk about our operating reserve requirement. It's per contract with y'all, we have to have 3 months of our expenses in an operating reserve to make sure we have that money available if it's needed. So the 3-month target for FY '24 is 5.6 million, which is being increased from the 5.3 million. So you will see that in the budget, that additional reserve amount needed, like 240,000 or so. So you will see that in the budget, and that is just our expenses go up, our operating reserve target goes up, and we need to mark the funds as reserves. And we have fully funded our operating reserve as of now also. For 23. So on this slide, we're showing the rate that we had for FY '23 and the rate that we are proposing for FY '24 for your vote. If you look at the chart on the right-hand side, you can see what makes up this rate. We looked at the water loss percent that we talked in the beginning, moving it from 9% to 5.5%, and calculated how much that saved us on the rate, essentially being able to sell more of the water that we're producing. And that was a 23-cent savings on the rate. However, with our expenses increasing, that caused a 28-cent increase on the rate, which is netted to that 5-cent increase that you're seeing, which is about a 2% increase on the water rate. Wastewater, water loss savings does not impact wastewater. So you'll see that 12 cents going up from the increased expenses, which is still about a 2% impact.
Yeah, I have a question about water loss. I mean, it seems to me that you would never want water loss because then you could always sell more water. How do you prevent water loss other than like not having a leak?
So some of the water loss is in the category of unaccounted for water. So the more we can account for, which is through the metering system that y'all put in, is one way that we can make sure that we have less water loss. Just from the accounting side. Is there anything that from operations?
Yeah, you're never gonna get rid of water loss. You're always gonna have it. Prime example is fire flows. So if you have a fire and the
Sure.
water that's used to put it out, just consider it water loss.
Sure,
You're always.
that's
gonna have-
reasonable.
Right, so you're always gonna have to flush the tanks, you're always gonna have fires, you're always gonna have to have meters where they register at 99% instead of 100%. So you're always gonna have these little things that add up to,
Mhm.
in this case, roughly a 5.5% water loss. The key is to minimize those. So when it comes to water breaks, knowing where the valves are, getting on it, isolating it as quick as possible. Flushing tanks, we've reduced that. We used to do it monthly years ago, now we're doing quarterly. And so it doesn't impact water quality, but you save a lot of water, and what you produce is what you sell.
Okay, so we're going from 9 to 5.5 through process improvement and technology improvement.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And then as you do that, costs go up because of it, or is that not related?
They're not related.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
I have a question before you leave this slide. Am I reading this left column right? Is that 6.5 billion gallons of water?
Yes.
Any other questions on that? Oh. So as I said in the beginning, we have some cost increases that we're looking at. Chemicals is a large cost increase for us. And chlorine is one of our largest cost drivers within chemicals. So that one is graphed here for you. We did receive a cost per ton adjustment from our supplier. Our contract with them is April to March, April to April, contract with them. And we buy our chlorine by the ton. It went from $17.49 to $22.39 or $2,300. So up $500 a ton for this next, technically that contract started with them, but this next budget year includes that price increase there for chlorine. So the graph just kind of shows that it's really not that we're using that much more chlorine, it's just that the price has gone up so much, to less. So one of the next things that we look at when we're building our budget is our staffing needs, and to make sure that the staff that we have at our facilities and indirectly supporting the division is appropriate and there's no adjustments needed year to year. So some of the assumptions, or not some assumptions, with the FTE changes, we did decrease our direct FTE 0.7 and we increased our indirect 2.88. The next slide has a little bit more detail on what makes up those changes. But as you can see from FY 17 until 24, we have to decrease our direct FTE rather significantly or so, reducing the staff needed to run the Woodlands division day to day. So the other thing we're looking at with our staffing assumptions is a 4% merit and promotion increase and a 2% inflationary adjustment, so our cost of living adjustment. So on the next slide, we'll look at what makes up those changes in our FTE count. So on this slide, you can see all of our indirect FTEs are those first categories. The Woodlands down at the bottom is our direct FTE for the Woodlands. So you can see the changes from 23 to 24 and the justification for those changes. The biggest driver is these projects we've got coming up in the Woodlands. We need more of our tech services department, which is our engineers and accounting, to help facilitate those projects and get them done. So one of the last, not one of the last, but another cost that we're looking at is our electrical cost is going up. So we have looked at the historical use of our electricity and added 10% for our FY 24 budget, which is why, or part of why it is going up 25% based on last year's budget, but we are over. So that is why it's not just a 10%, but that is the direction we received, is to take our 12 months of historical use and increase it 10% for the FY 24 budget on electrical. So on this slide, I took the first 3 pages of the draft budget in y'all's, the first 3 pages in your presentation is our operating draft budget. So I took those and I looked at our budget variances for dollars and percents, and anything that was a change of $20,000 or more, positive or negative, and a 20% or greater increase or decrease change there is on this slide with a little bit more information on exactly what was driving that line item change. So this last slide is just to show the rates that we are proposing again for FY 24. The top right has that little chart there that shows you some of the drivers, the water loss change and our increased expenses to get from our FY 23 rate to our FY 24 rate. So as a reminder, we are proposing a water rate of $2.78 per 1,000 gallons and a wastewater rate of $5.65 per 1,000 gallons.
Did you cover GRP's rate?
I keep forgetting. I would have forgotten because that's my last slide. So Chris wants me to remind y'all of our good news that I keep forgetting. Our GRP rate is not changing. So the cost that we buy our water from GRP to sell here in the Woodlands is going to remain the same FY 23 to 24. So that's $2.99 for groundwater, $3.41 for surface water, which is the blended rate of $3.20 that we charge y'all to then collect from your customers. So those rates are not changing. You will see in the draft budget, there's a slight change in the GRP groundwater pumpage fees and surface water fees, but that's because there was a slight change in our production number that just changed the dollar amount there, but not because of the rates. Any questions?
Not necessarily about the presentation per se, but just in general, what would change the ratio of the groundwater to surface water, like on an ongoing basis? So you gave us two components right now of the GRP rate. One was the groundwater one, and then you gave us a blended rate. What would change to make that rate different than what's projected? I mean, drought and weather conditions and,
The blended rate, that's just, it's set based on our blend ratio that is negotiated with GRP. So that's not gonna change not your year, but within the year without there being a change to GRP's budget, what they're willing to supply us. If they change to a 65-35, then that calculation changes because it's just a straight 50% of groundwater plus 50% of surface water addition to that 320.
And to go just a tad bit deeper, weather does play an important factor because it's 50-50 blend based off the budgeted production.
I guess that's what I'm getting at.
So if it's wetter, then it's easier to achieve 50-50, right? It's pretty much standard. If it gets dry though, we do not increase GRP's plant to produce more unless the review committee says, yeah, produce more. Example being last August of 22 in the drought, we actually limited the plant to 13 MPD instead of scaling up because it would have been more expensive. So if it's wet, 50-50 is easy. If it's dry, you're probably going to be dropping in percentage and using more groundwater because I can't scale it.
And does that affect immediate to the end consumer, or is it a lag from one accounting period to the next?
So financially, the rate stays the same.
Oh.
Because it's an annual average of what we're shooting for.
Gotcha.
And there's no impact.
And I have one other question, if no one else has any. So when you're expecting the MUDs to vote on this budget, right, at some point, are we gonna vote individually, or does that vote being taken by the trustee board?
So the individual MUDs will vote in July and they will direct their trustee to vote in August. And then the trustees in turn are directing our board in August.
So the individual MUD vote is not the vote that's counted per se, right? It's the vote of the trustee board that actually, that you have that has a bearing on what happens. Okay, all right.
That's all I have. If y'all have any other questions. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I not so much a question, more like a confirmation. So Ted had mentioned, the weather, or confirming that the weather does have an effect, but if it's also wetter, then people don't use as much water and your income goes down well. So it's very much double-edged sword that
Correct.
you have to maintain 50-50 in accordance to what you've agreed to.
So yeah, the blend ratio is easier to hit when it's wet because GRP is not going to have to scale up and the groundwater is just what's needed, but you're exactly right. Because then the revenue is going to suffer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, so item number 9, I believe number 10 is where we are. Receive the attorney's report.
Yes, sir. So under the attorney's report, I've been reporting on the status of the legislative session. So if you're interested in particular bills, I went through a fairly thorough update at the trustees meeting. Would encourage y'all to take a look at that video. We are in that very final stages period of the session when it can't really say what's going to pass. You can identify bills that are definitely dead, but bills that are still moving, it's impossible to handicap what will ultimately pass in the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of friction right now between the House and the Senate on some very big issues, school vouchers, and property taxes being two of the biggest. And we've seen this before where you get down to the end of the session and the two chambers can't agree on some really big issues, and it starts to lock up the plumbing of the legislature for other bills that don't have anything to do with the main contentious issues. And you start to see bills die, not based on their merits, but because of these other larger issues. So we're concerned that that could happen this session, but don't know yet. So we're very busy there right now. And we'll of course have the summary for y'all either at your June or July meeting on all the bills that be of interest that did pass and some that didn't, that will impact our special purpose districts.
And when does the session end? 20,
29th,
29th.
Memorial Day.
And I know there was one particular bill that you discussed that had to do with a mud, qualifications for a mud director having to actually live in the district, not just own property in the district.
Yep.
Anything about that one in
So that
particular?
bill is still alive. It passed. Is. House Bill 1793. That bill has passed the House and is sent to the Senate committee. It has not yet, last I checked over the weekend or on Monday, had not made it out of the Senate committee to be able to go to the floor. So that's one of those that's, I think the window's starting to close on it being able to pass, but still could at the last minute. But that's the bill that would require a director to own property in the district, not just live in a district. So the ability to rent and live in the district and be qualified to be a director would no longer be available.
And I only raise that question, does that affect us at all? Any of our city
I don't know
members?
what the specific qualification are for each of our directors. I mean, they know that they have to be qualified and they sign the affidavit to that extent, to that effect when they join a board. But I don't know how each director is able to qualify, whether they are residents or and rent, or if they're residents and own property, or if they just own property.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I had a question, Brian. The situation that was going on with Conroe and the water, has that already been solved? Or I mean, is that like, are we through with that, or is that still going on with
$14
$14 million that comes to the.
Yeah.
Oh,
that litigation is still ongoing.
sorry, I couldn't remember the
Yeah.
the name of it, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
that litigation is still ongoing.
All right. Anything else?
Not under the attorney's report, that one.
So you're ready for number 11?
Yes.
All right, so item number 11 is stated as a supplemental agenda in English and Spanish regarding canvassing the returns of the defined area election and bond and maintenance tax election that was held on May 6th.
Canvas. It's the last day to canvas, so this worked out. So we did receive the voter tally from Montgomery County. As you know, Montgomery County did conduct the election on the district's behalf for the creation of the defined area and the propositions to give voter authorization for the defined area and to impose a maintenance tax. All four of those propositions passed by a vote of 2-0. So we are able to, that's from Montgomery County elections. We received that on May 10th. That's the official results. So we are able to take action on item number 1 to canvass the returns of the defined area election and bond and maintenance tax election adoption of the order. And those results.
And so I'm assuming we're going to need a motion to accept the report, the canvas as presented to us.
And adopt the order, yes.
And adopt the order. Okay. So do we need to see that at all or discuss it or just the
Well, I
fact that
think
it came from the Montgomery County and it's been kind of certified, if you will? I know I'm not using the right verbiage, but
It's the official results from the final results of the election. And I think the order, I believe, is on the Google Drive. We may need to, if y'all want a copy of the election results, you can get those, you can download those directly from Montgomery County elections.
I don't necessarily need them. I was just wondering if we needed to see that at all before we take the motion and make the approval. So I guess we would fall into the English version of the motion,
That's correct.
and I don't see that here, but.
That's correct. Motion on item number 1.
All right, so consider canvassing the returns of the defined area election and bond and maintenance tax held on May 6th and the adoption of the order. So we need a motion on that. So Jim, so moves. Second. All right, we have a motion and a second for supplemental agenda item number 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right,
Next item, approval and execution of a fourth amendment and restated district information form relative to the defined area election and bond and maintenance. So as y'all know, the district has a district information form that's recorded in the property records. It's recorded by the water code. We consider updates to that every year when we adopt our tax rate, because included in that is the notice to purchasers that has what your current tax rate is. So you see this every year when we amend it. Well, we need to amend it now because we now have a defined area. So we've added paragraphs in there to note that there is a defined area, include the legal description of the defined area as an exhibit to the notice to purchasers, list what the authorized tax rate is for the defined area for maintenance tax, that's $1. List the bond authorization for the defined area, which is 44,800,000, and also update the notice to purchasers to include language that the district has a defined area and what the current tax rate is, which is 0 for the defined area. So those are our modifications to our district information form, which will make it our fourth amended and restated district information form. So we need a motion to approve that district information form and authorize that to be recorded in the property records as required by the water code.
just one quick question. So when you talk about notice to property purchasers, is that for everybody in the district or just the defined area?
So the notice to purchasers is required to be provided by law to any purchaser of property in the district. So if somebody buys a home in the existing 39, they get the same form. We've just added language to it to note that there is a defined area in the district, but that is included in all the notice to purchasers, whether you are actually in the defined area or not.
Gotcha. So I'm assuming that that's not going to be an issue for people buying property elsewhere. They're going to get this notice, oh my God, I got to pay $1 in tax extra. We're going to have that issue, do you think at all, or is it something we should be concerned with?
Tax bills that folks get will reflect what the current tax rate of the district is. And there's also, as the next item, a notice of designation of the defined area that is also recorded in the property records that also has the needs and bounds description of the defined area attached. So what should be happening is when folks buy property, they get a title policy and they run title, all the steps that come up in the title company should go through this and, be able to determine if the property is located in the boundaries of that defined area. That's what should happen.
All right.
We'll get some phone calls about it and have to explain it, even from title companies.
And I'm just wondering, should we get ahead of that in any way, if that's even possible? I don't know, but letting people know that, hey, this is a special purpose, special defined area, and it's only pertaining to that particular area. And so I guess if we just handle it as they come in, as the calls come in. Okay.
It's self-explanatory.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we need a motion and a second on item number 2, consider approval and execution of the fourth amended and restated district information form relative to and said defined area election and bond and maintenance tax elections. So
I'll move for approval.
Second.
we have a motion in 2 seconds. The second square.
This is a third.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the proposal as presented. All those signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
And the third item, we just talked about that, the notice of the designation of the defined area. So we need a motion on that. That also gets recorded in the property records.
All right, so as Brian just stated, we need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any abstentions, any opposition? Motion carries. All right,
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
done deal. We just increased the size of our district. Because we now have stated the boundaries. All right, so item number 12, receive Woodlands Water staff information on pavement and underground utility conditions at Trade Center Boulevard and Donwick. And this is an issue that we talked about a little bit a couple of meetings back. A resident came to us and stated that there were some concerns about the condition of the roads at that time. And stated that he felt like the problem was caused by inferior materials used by and or supported by the district. So both Eric and Jim went out there and looked at that, and I think they had some other staff go out and look at it. So Eric's going to bring us up to date where we are. We did talk about possibly doing some modifications or some changes just for the aesthetic, I believe, of the areas, but not necessarily the functionality of the road. So I think that's what Eric's going to cover.
Yes, we covered it a little bit, but just to give an update, there's kind of two areas in question. One was on Trade Center Boulevard, one was on Donwick around the corner. On as far as Trade Center Boulevard goes, we reached out to the county, let them know kind of what the concern was. They went out and looked at it, and they don't believe that it's severe enough, the little kind of ripples or bumps to be for them to do anything. So they're not planning on making any action on Trade Center Boulevard. Around the corner on Donwick is a little bit different story. We looked at that. That would be actually our storm sewer. And so if you look at the pictures, which I think we provided last month as well, there's a good bit of drop and sinking of kind of the apron of both of those inlets, both the one on the east side and the west side of Donwick there. That's right as Trade Center turns, and it kind of goes from the wider right there at what's the, I forgot. Halliburton. It's right there at Halliburton on both sides.
Like Donwick.
Correct. No, that's what I was shooting for is Halliburton. So we went out, we did some additional testing, looked at to see if the structure of the inlet underneath what we see here was compromised in any way. It doesn't appear that it is. It doesn't appear that it is a broken pipe right underneath there. It just looks like it's been settled and cracked over the years. And so we have gone out and talked to our go-to contractors and looked at it, and they've given us some numbers to fix both the east and the west aprons and those inlets. Each of the fixes would be about $7,500 each. So for a total of $15,000 to fix both sides of it. They're gonna have to cut out around it, fix the apron, fix the curbing on both sides, and clean that up, make sure the drainage is working properly as well. As you know, that's the low area of that little point. So it should improve the drainage. It also should improve the safety of a tire actually going across. It's not typically, people don't probably drive that close to the curb because it starts to widen up right there as it's turning on the Trade Center, but I mean, it could be a safety situation. So our suggestion to the board for consideration would be to move forward with the repairs of those two inlets on either side of Dunwoody, if you so choose.
Questions?
15,000 total.
Yes.
Do we have any funds set aside for contingencies like that?
Specifically, I believe there is, we can look at that closer. We can look at that closer. Yes.
I mean, I'll say that, I mean, I live like 2 streets over from this, and it rained all last week. And I take this multiple times per day. I now know where these drainage are because of the pictures, but before that, I never noticed them. And I've never had any issues with getting around or, even my little Altima almost, hitting it. So I don't think it's a huge concern, but if we have the funds to fix it and it doesn't hurt the overall budget in a significant way, that, maybe it's kind of like a goodwill towards the district to fix it. If it's, if we can swing it financially.
And we did confirm we have storm sewer budget.
Yeah.
Enough to cover it without having to adjust the budget at all.
Well, assuming there's not another thing that pops up, but we put budgetary items for this type of thing.
So I just want to make sure we understand that based on your assessment, based on the county's assessment, and based on the contractors and so forth, you feel very confident that the infrastructure is solid and good. So, because this resident's gonna come back and say, oh, you just painted over it, it's just a Band-Aid approach. So I want to make sure we understand, I understand, so I can address his comments when they come up. I invited him to be here today, but he didn't make it for whatever reason. So,
So on Trade Center is a little different than this. His contention on Trade Center is that those little dips are the result of settling due to previous compaction or previous bedding and backfill of the pipe 40 years or 30 years ago. We've not seen any indication of that, nor does it appear that they're really continuing to move. And the county doesn't believe it's an issue that they want to get in, that they think is a
Right.
problem.
so there's
So
no,
based on those things, the recommendation would not be to do anything on Trade Center.
right. But I guess back to the Donwick scenario, once you address the facade, once you address the aesthetics of it, there's nothing structural that needs to be done or that should be done or that's impaired in any way. And again, I know we talked about this. I can't remember what he talked about, but some kind of sand, firming sand or something that,
That's what he's talking about Trade Center.
okay, not this. Okay. So this really is just an aesthetic issue.
Well, I mean, the concern here is particularly on the west wing, is if you look closely on the last page, you see that metal grate. That metal grate is coming off of the frame. Drop the one on the right. See how much lower? It's about 3 inches lower than the concrete level.
Gotcha.
If that comes off of the frame that it sits on and falls in, that could be a big problem as far as a safety concern for drivability. The rest of it might just be a nuisance. I mean, it's a larger drop than you would definitely want. I mean, there's tolerances where
Right.
you wouldn't necessarily do something if it was just, maybe an inch or a half inch or something that's settled, but both of these are worse than that threshold. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of why we're saying,
All right.
might be a good idea to address it.
Okay.
And for the reasons that you gave for the community as well, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. Yeah.
So based on staff's recommendation that we do address this and the confirmation that we do have the funds already in the budget for such a provision for fixing things like this, we should entertain a motion then to accept the proposal to spend the $15,000 to get these 2 drainage areas fixed on Donwick. Are you making that proposal?
Yeah,
I mean, motion.
I'll make a motion to do that.
All right. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve $15,000 out of the budget to fix the 2 inlets or drainages on Donwick. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, folks, very much for the input. We appreciate your hard work on that.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item number 13, receive the general manager's report.
Thanks. Just wanted to go through a couple of minor things, quick things in our report. Wanted to point out that our annual hydrant and audit flushing program is complete, and we're sorting through some of the things that were identified within that report. Nothing major was identified. I wanted to point out several customer thank yous that were sent out for not only our in-house staff, but also our field staff as well, on timeliness and friendliness and level of service. So they really appreciated when they interacted with us. I wanted to share with the board that I'd like going forward to carve out a little bit of time in the meeting to give John Geiger an opportunity to address the board on the various great things that we're doing on community, common communication outreach. As you know, we have a strategic communication plan that was created through the PC. That's been in motion since last fall. I'd like for John to give the boards a quick update on all the things. Plus, in light of the fact that the PR campaign is going to be kicking off later this year, it's going to be a much more robust situation. We are already doing some things through the strategic communication plan. So with that, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity to sure everybody's up to speed on what we're communicating, how we're communicating, and build your knowledge as far as what's being put out with our messaging. And then the first bullet, so on 65, you have a communication report. That first bullet refers to the year-end reports that the MUD's been sending out for the last 3 months. And yours is in process. That's a good thing. And working with you to get that out. Those have been really well received thus far. We've been sending those out via email and as an insert on with the monthly water bill and tracking the responses to that. Folks are excited to hear from the MUDs, excited to get those reports. They're opening emails, they're reading them. Our analytics tell us. And that's really important. Because if you go back up top, I put a statistic in there from some research from the American Water Works Association. And it really speaks to how critical it is that customers hear from us, good, bad, and otherwise. Communication matters. The more we communicate, the more familiar they are with us, the more trust is built, and the more support we're going to get when the bad things hit, whether that be a service interruption or rate increases and so forth. So that second statistic on there, people who recall having received communication from their water utility in the last year report higher satisfaction with their water than those who don't recall any communication. So just hearing from us, period, makes folks feel better about the service they're providing, the safety and quality of their water. There's a strong psychological effect there. So we want to keep getting more communication out. We want to make sure we're hitting all of our target markets and presenting a multitude of ways for folks to hear from us, whether it be social media, whether it be print, in person, and all the rest. The website has been a barometer for this to some degree. Happy to see that we've seen an uptick in visitation over the last 6-7 months since we've started this new strategic plan. That's positive. We're continuing to trend in the right direction. We are down significantly from where we were 3 years ago. Not entirely sure why that is, but that's important to look at that and to make sure that we do continue to trend back with our website views. We're getting out in the public, right? We're getting qualitative data as well by interacting with individuals at outreach events, hearing from them, talking face to face. That's a one-on-one, more intensive effort, but that really matters too. And again, we get a lot of feedback that way, so that's important for us to continue to do those outreach events. If you're not on the weekly e-blast, let me know. I'll get you on there. That goes out every Monday morning. It's our irrigation recommendation and newsletter. That's being opened and read by over 10,000 residences. We got a 55% open rating for the emails we send out. So people are excited to get that, reading it. And that's another good way to gauge the type of information we're putting out. But let me know if you're not on that list, and I'm sure you are. Some folks are on that list, but it's going to spam. So check that too.
I get it every week.
Awesome.
Yep.
And if you have feedback on that in any regard, please let me know, or contact. We are exiting Q2 of strategic plan. We'll start, which is water quality. And next month, we'll change our focus to water conservation. So you'll see digital ads and ads in Woodland Community Magazine that will change focus from water quality to water conservation. We've been pretty successful with our marketing on the water quality. We've had really good engagement with those ads. We're not just throwing them out, but people are actually seeing them, clicking on them. I'm encouraged by that. And with that, are there any questions?
One quick question, John. You're talking about this marketing, and I'm looking at this community impact print, 102 homes. That's not just the Woodlands, right? That's the whole community, including other parts of Montgomery County. Just under the,
Yeah, their reach extends beyond the Woodlands. So in order for us to encompass all the Woodlands, we extend out.
gotcha. All right.
That's right.
So that has to be, because the number for the community, Woodlands Community Magazine is 44, which makes more sense that would be
Exactly.
the Woodlands itself.
So that's going to every household and every apartment in the Woodlands every month automatically. So that's a key piece for us. Community surveys continue to rate that it's the #1 source of information residents report information from. So we buy an expensive 2/3 paid ad in there every month, and then we usually get 300-word article. Next month is going to be water loss. I'm going to review that with you before we print. Yeah, so that's going to be reporting on the great water loss improvement we've seen through the smart meters.
I will say the weekly irrigation report is very helpful and it's a very calming effect in my home.
Okay.
Because my wife constantly wants me to run the sprinkler system and I'm constantly telling her, we don't necessarily need it. And I have something to go back to from an official and say, they're telling us not to run the sprinkler system for 2 days or whatever the case
Try
may
to make
be.
it very straightforward.
So it's marriage counseling.
It's marriage counsel.
We
One,
serve in many ways.
one other piece to add to that, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of this. When I first moved to the Woodlands about 4 years ago, I found it incredibly supportive knowing that I can have a smart meter and I can upgrade my sprinkler system because obviously it does get very hot and I need water. But I can apply for the credits. I think it's like $300, like one-time thing here with the Woodlands Water Agency.
150.
Sorry, 150, and it went a long way. So I mean, something like that was extremely helpful to just upgrade and make sure it's water conscious.
That's great to hear, and we want to continue to push that information, our variety of programs and services to help people save water, save money.
So
We have a transient community, so we want to keep pushing those basic messages. So we'll see an ad, next month's ad will have the new dates in there. In the Woodlands Community Magazine, that is.
that one helped my marriage a lot when I upgraded the sprinkler system.
It's all helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Was that the end of your report, Eric, or?
That was, I was gonna note that we made a presentation on the proposed billing software at the trustee meeting. That was the only other thing I have.
And will you share that with us at some point at the individual meetings or?
Wasn't going to, it was
Okay.
more for the audit committee and the trustees.
Gotcha.
But once that comes about, we can certainly look at going over it in some degree.
I think mainly just for information purposes, so that if we encounter any residents along the way that ask questions,
Sure.
we at least are familiar with what's going on,
Absolutely.
if nothing else. So, all right, so item number 14, the trustee report. I know that's in the packet. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
There was a good bit of discussion. There was a couple resident comments. There was a good bit of discussion on HB 1540. And then there was a little bit of discussion about the surplus funds.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, that's in the packet as well. So if you have any questions about that, we're happy to address it. But I think Chris did an excellent job in explaining how that works between the agencies and the SGR. All right, item number 15, recess to close session.
Sir.
All right, item number 16, reconvene. We're reconvened because we didn't close. Item number 17, discuss any matters for placement on the future agenda. So did I don't know if I understood, you want to put John on the agenda as a standing?
Not necessarily. I think
Okay.
one MUD actually asked for that specifically, but most haven't. I was just gonna propose to give him a spot in the GM report. It's not
Okay.
necessary.
No, that's fine. If you want to do it in the GM report, great. If you want to do it separately, that's good too.
If there's a reason to pull it out for action or something in the future, we can.
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessary at the moment.
Any other items? Gentlemen? Anything for future agenda? No? All right. Well, there being no further business to discuss on this board, we are adjourned at 12:57.
Really do like the new blue one.